The city was a living, breathing entity with its own heartbeat and secrets. But beneath its vibrant pulse, something sinister was stirring. I remember the first crime scene vividly. The air was thick with the scent of fear and confusion. A man lay dead in the middle of a bustling street, yet the crowd around him was eerily silent. I was just another detective, drawn to the scene by the sheer oddity of it all. Witnesses stood like statues, their eyes wide but mouths sealed shut. When I approached them, their responses were as if they had been rehearsed in a play of absurdity. I saw a bird, a giant bird, swoop down and take him, one said, while another claimed, he just vanished into thin air. It was like stepping into a puzzle where every piece was a lie. Each murder that followed was the same, public, witnessed, yet shrouded in a fog of bizarre silence. The city's pulse seemed to quicken with each incident, as if it was feeding off the chaos. My investigation led me down a rabbit hole of secrets. Each witness, I discovered, was linked to a shadowy organization woven into the very fabric of our city's history. This wasn't just about solving murders. It was about unraveling a conspiracy that had its tendrils in every aspect of life here. As I delved deeper, I began to feel the weight of eyes upon me, the sensation of being watched, manipulated. The organization wasn't just covering up crimes, it was orchestrating them, controlling the narrative, and perhaps controlling me. Now, standing at the edge of this abyss, I realized that to solve this case, I must confront not only the killers, but the unseen forces that dictate the city's destiny. The truth, I fear, might be more than I can handle, but I must press on. The deeper I dug, the more I realized that every lead, every clue, was a thread in a vast, intricate web. And I, unwittingly, had become ensnared. The next murder was different. It happened in broad daylight in the heart of the city's financial district. A well-known banker, his life snuffed out amidst the clamor of commerce. Yet again, the witnesses were there, but their stories were no less fantastical. He was arguing with a shadow, one claimed, her voice trembling. Another, a street vendor, insisted, the ground opened up and swallowed him whole. My skepticism was wearing thin. These weren't just lies, they were crafted illusions, designed to mislead and confuse. I started to track the witnesses, piecing together their lives. Each one, from the banker's assistant to the street performer, had ties to this mysterious group. Their connections were subtle, often hidden behind layers of normalcy. A shared membership at a local club, a common employer, or a peculiar hobby that seemed innocuous at first glance. One evening, I followed a lead to an old, seemingly abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town. The air was cold, the kind of cold that seeps into your bones, whispering secrets of the past. Inside, I found not the expected den of criminals, but a gathering. Men and women, all dressed in ordinary attire, yet their faces bore the mark of something deeper, something more profound than the everyday life they pretended to lead. As I watched from the shadows, a speaker took the stage, his voice low, but carrying an undeniable authority. Our purpose is to maintain order, to ensure the city thrives under our guidance, he said. Each of you has a role, a part to play in this grand design. It was then I understood. This wasn't merely about crime, it was about control. This organization, this secret society, was manipulating events, not for chaos, but for a twisted form of order. They were the puppeteers, and the city, its unwitting marionette. The realization was chilling. Every murder, every bizarre witness account was a move in their game. And I, by investigating, had inadvertently become a player, perhaps even a pawn in their grand scheme. As I left the warehouse, the weight of my discovery heavy on my shoulders, I knew I was no longer just hunting for a killer. I was now up against an entity that had been shaping the city's fate for decades. The question wasn't just who was committing these murders, but why. And more importantly, how could I stop them without becoming another casualty in their silent war for control? The next morning, I woke up with a resolve as cold and sharp as the steel of my service revolver. The city outside my window seemed to mock me with its indifference, its people moving through their lives unaware of the strings that pulled them. I knew I had to act, to find the puppet master behind this grotesque theater. I started by revisiting the crime scenes, looking for something I might have missed. Each location, now eerily quiet, whispered tales of the chaos that had unfolded. At the site of the banker's murder, I noticed something odd. A small, almost invisible symbol etched into the pavement near where he fell. It was a triangle with an eye at its center, the same emblem I'd seen on the cufflinks of the speaker at the warehouse. This symbol was my new lead. I spent days in the archives, sifting through old case files, city records, and historical documents. The symbol appeared sporadically, linked to unexplained events, political shifts, and even the founding of some of the city's most influential institutions. It was as if this group had been orchestrating the city's destiny since its inception. My investigation took me to the city's oldest library, where I met an elderly historian, Mr. Thompson, who had spent his life studying the city's underbelly. Over tea, he revealed that the symbol belonged to an ancient order known as the Architects of Order. Their mission, he explained, was to maintain balance through control, believing that chaos was the true enemy of progress. "Their methods are extreme, Detective," he said, his voice a whisper of caution. "They believe that to maintain order, sacrifices must be made, lives must be manipulated. They see themselves as the guardians of the city's soul." Armed with this knowledge, I began to connect the dots. The murders were not random acts of violence, but strategic moves in a larger game. Each victim was chosen to send a message, to shift power, or to eliminate threats to their control. I needed to infiltrate their ranks, to understand their next move. Using the information from Mr. Thompson, I fabricated a backstory, presenting myself as a disillusioned officer looking to join their cause. It was risky, but necessary. My first meeting with them was at a nondescript office building downtown. The room was filled with the same faces I'd seen at the warehouse, now looking at me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. I was introduced to their leader, a man known only as the Architect. His presence was commanding, his eyes piercing, as if he could see through my facade. "Why do you wish to join us, Detective?" he asked, his voice smooth like velvet. I spoke of disillusionment with the justice system, of my desire for true order. He listened, nodding, his gaze never leaving mine. After what felt like an eternity, he extended an invitation to a more exclusive gathering where I would be tested further. The night of the test was fraught with tension. I was led to an underground chamber beneath the city, a place where the air was thick with the weight of history and secrets. There, I was given a task, to prove my loyalty by eliminating a threat to the city's stability, a journalist who had been digging too deep. But I had other plans. Instead of following their orders, I confronted the Architect directly. "Why these murders? Why this control?" I demanded, my voice echoing off the stone walls. He smiled, a cold, calculating smile. "To maintain balance, Detective, each life taken is a necessary sacrifice for the greater good. You see, chaos is not just an absence of order, it's a force that must be actively fought against." I argued that their version of order was tyranny, that true balance comes from freedom, not control. The room grew silent, the members watching, waiting for his response. "You are either with us, or you are against us," he said finally, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. I made my choice. Drawing my gun, I aimed not at the journalist, but at the Architect. "I choose justice," I declared, and the room erupted into chaos. The ensuing struggle was fierce. I managed to subdue the Architect, but not without cost. As I was dragging him out, members of the Order tried to stop me, but the sound of sirens in the distance signaled the arrival of backup. In the aftermath, with the Architect in custody, the city felt different, lighter somehow. But as I stood there, watching the sunrise over the city skyline, I knew this was just the beginning. The roots of this conspiracy ran deep, and while I had cut off one head, the hydra of control still lurked beneath the surface, waiting for its next opportunity to rise. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the city, I found myself standing at the threshold of an old, dilapidated mansion on the city's outskirts. The mansion, once a symbol of grandeur, now stood as a testament to decay, its walls whispering secrets of the past. This was the final piece of the puzzle, the lair of the Architect, the elusive leader of the secret society known as the Architects of Order. I had followed a trail of breadcrumbs, each clue more cryptic than the last, leading me here. The door creaked ominously as I pushed it open, the sound echoing through the empty halls. Inside, the air was musty, filled with the scent of old books and dust. I moved cautiously, my hand resting on my gun, every sense heightened. The mansion was a labyrinth of dark corridors and shadowy rooms, each turn revealing more of its forgotten history. Finally, I reached a grand hall, where a large, ornate table sat at its center, surrounded by chairs that had once hosted the city's elite. At the head of the table, a figure stood, silhouetted against the dim light from a stained glass window. "Detective," the architect's voice cut through the silence, smooth and chilling. "I've been expecting you." I stepped forward, my heart pounding not with fear, but with the adrenaline of finally confronting the source of all the chaos. "This ends tonight," I said, my voice steady despite the tension. He turned, his face illuminated by the fading light, revealing a man of indeterminate age, his eyes sharp and calculating. "You think you understand our purpose, but you see only the surface. We are the balance, the necessary evil to keep the city from descending into anarchy." "You call murder and manipulation balance?" I countered, my grip tightening on my gun. "Every city has its architects, detective. We merely ensure the blueprint is followed. Each act, each sacrifice, is calculated to maintain the equilibrium. You've disrupted that, and now you must understand the consequences." The room felt colder, the weight of his words pressing down like the heavy air before a storm. "What consequences?" I asked, though I feared I already knew.
"Chaos," he replied simply. "Without our guidance, the city will tear itself apart. You've seen the witnesses, how they cling to their silence or madness. That's our control. Without it, imagine the havoc."
I shook my head, refusing to accept his twisted logic. "You've manipulated lives, ended them for your order. That's not control. That's tyranny." He laughed, a sound devoid of warmth. "And what would you do, detective? Expose us? The city thrives on secrets. Reveal ours, and you'll plunge it into the very chaos you seek to prevent." The tension in the room was palpable, a thick, oppressive fog that seemed to stifle any breath of reason or morality. I could feel the eyes of the other members, their gazes like the cold touch of specters, judging, waiting. "You've already started that chaos," I said, my voice echoing off the ancient walls. "Your control has cost lives, real lives, not just pawns in your game." The architect's eyes narrowed. A flicker of something, anger or perhaps fear, flashed through them. "You are naive, detective. The city needs a firm hand. Without us, it would crumble under its own weight, under the weight of its own freedom." I stepped closer, my resolve hardening. Freedom isn't chaos. It's the foundation of true order, not this manipulation. He moved then, swift as a shadow, pulling a hidden lever beneath the table. The room's atmosphere changed instantly. The walls began to close in, the sound of grinding stone filling the air. "If you won't join us, then you will be buried with us," he hissed, his voice now a snarl of desperation. I lunged, tackling him to the ground as the room continued to contract. We wrestled, the gun slipping from my grasp, sliding across the floor. The architect reached for it, but I grabbed his wrist, twisting it back. "You can't control everything," I grunted, the strain evident in my voice. "Not the truth, not justice." His face was inches from mine, his breath hot with rage. "You'll see, detective. You'll see what happens when the order we provide is gone." With a heave, I managed to pin him, my knee pressing into his back. The room was now a mere sliver of its former size, the walls groaning with the pressure. I could hear the distant sound of the mansion's structure protesting, the very foundation of their control literally crumbling around us. I reached for my handcuffs, securing his hands behind his back. "This ends here. Your order, your control, it ends now." As the walls neared, I dragged him towards the only exit, a narrow passage that had appeared as if by design, perhaps an escape route for the very architects who now faced their own trap. We emerged into the cool night air, the mansion behind us groaning its last, collapsing into itself. The architect, now subdued, looked back at the ruin of his empire, his face a mask of disbelief and defeat. "Your order was built on fear, on lies," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. Now, let's see how the city thrives without your strings. As we moved towards the police station, the city's skyline loomed in the distance, a silent witness to the events that had unfolded. The architect, his wrists bound, walked with a defeated slump, his once commanding presence reduced to that of a mere man. The city, now free from the immediate grip of the secret society, seemed to breathe easier. Yet, as I handed the architect over to my colleagues, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. The conspiracy was vast, its roots deep within the city's foundation. The interrogation room was stark, the fluorescent lights casting harsh shadows. The architect sat across from me, his demeanor calm, almost serene, as if he had accepted his fate but still held on to his convictions. "You've dismantled our structure, Detective," he began, his voice steady. "But remember, order is a cycle. It will return, perhaps in a different guise, but it will return." I leaned forward, determined to uncover whatever remnants of their network might still linger in the shadows of the city. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.